This may seem like overkill after such a wonderful homily, but this man deserves overkill. I suppose the best place to start is to say that I wanted to share something this afternoon because Dan and I share the same name. Truth be told, there's a lot of Dan Flahertys running around. I'm not going to start listing them because then I'll forget someone, and I don't want to do that. But it's a very good name to have, particularly because of him. In fact, one of my all-time favorite stories revolves around the time I called St. Ignatius College Prep to advocate for a student of mine from Hardy Prep. And the secretary told me the president, Brian Paulson, was in a meeting, and could she take a message? When I said, can you ask him to call Dan Flaherty? She said, hold on. I'll go get him out of the meeting. And I was left saying into an empty phone, no, not that Dan Flaherty. I like sharing his name. It carries some clout, particularly with the Jesuits. And when Kathleen shared the news that Dan had passed with me, my first call was to Brian Paulson. He was on the West Coast, and I woke him up around 4 o'clock in the morning his time. Since the services were being held in Michigan, services he was going to celebrate, he quickly offered to do something like this for our family here in Chicago. Thank you, Brian, and I apologize for waking you up. I guess his name still does carry some clout with the Jesuits. It also carries some clout with the Flahertys, because even though it was somewhat intriguing to read about his incredible accomplishments, to learn that the Jesuits knew him as a brother priest, a teacher, a disciplinarian, a writer, an editor, a business manager, a director, a trustee, and a provincial who went by the nom de plume Flax, and quick aside here, how did I not know that? Well, anyway, we knew him as Father Dan, Dan S.J., Uncle Dan, or just plain Dan. Dan was my dad's cousin, Uncle Bill's cousin, Aunt Jeannie's cousin, Uncle Michael, and Aunt Lucy Ann's cousin. And we saw him around every now and again for years. Big family gatherings, the occasional backyard barbecue. He was the guy with the jet black, slick back hair. The guy whose father had the rose garden at Buckingham Fountain. But he was definitely not a regular. Then, after his dear sister Judy passed away, at my mom's request, he joined the weekly ritual of our infamous Sunday dinners. Some of the folks here aren't Kentucky Flahertys, so I'll explain. Every Sunday night, my father and mother hosted Sunday dinner, and the whole clan gathered in their dining room, kitchen and basement, to eat together, to laugh together, and to pray together. People came and went. Priests, nuns, other people, mostly priests like the Tivys and Hastings, but they weren't regulars. Dan became a regular. Uncle Dan slid in seamlessly and effortlessly. He good-naturedly laughed off the teasing from his Constant Street cousins, my dad and Uncle Bill. He quickly secured a designated spot at the dining room table, right at my mom, the lovely lady's left hand, and established himself as one of the few that could actually sing Happy Birthday and the 12 Days of Christmas in tune. He also has a designated spot in the living room, the armchair next to the love seat furthest from the door. He was usually one of the first to arrive, so it was not a problem, but if he arrived later and the seat was occupied, whoever was in it got up and skedaddled. It was Dan's chair. He had a great big booming laugh and a giant radio announcer greeting for everyone who entered the room, particularly to the grandkids of the third generation, the majority of whom he had given some lilting nickname that played on their given name, in Italian or Spanish or Gaelic, or in my daughter Sarah's case, Hebrew. He loved to call her Princess. I have a very distinct, very vivid memory of him holding her on the balcony of horse racing at Sportsman Park for the 60th annual running of the Anime Derby, Grandma's birthday, an outing he helped arrange through his friendship with Stormy Bidwell. Sarah was a year old, and normally as wriggly as a chihuahua on amphetamines, but she sat calmly in his big hands as he balanced her on the rail of the owner's box to watch the horse racing. We were about 4 stories off the ground, so I was having a major wriggly moment myself. But he held her so tightly, yet so gently, that she couldn't have been safer if she was sitting on the ground. Another aside here that I haven't written is, yesterday we welcomed another great niece, Gwendolyn Rose. I imagine very quickly she would have become Lady Guinevere, or something very similar to him. I'm sure all my brothers and sisters have stories and moments and memories, like how he showed up in his 70s to help Peggy move out of her 3rd floor walk-up apartment, and just happened to have a set of tools in his car. Or the Jesuit staff cars that Johnny's family inherited on a semi-annual basis. Or his flower planting expeditions that had Peggy and a lot of the younger people on that side of the room digging up the yard at Canisius House for him. Or the snowblower he gifted me with, that obviously survived Robert Peary's expedition to the North Pole and weighed more than the car I put it in. And most especially and most fondly, his Christmas gifts of flashlights and pens and XXL golf shirts. And how he snuck food to all of our various dogs and called each and every one of them Bum. Now, I started this out by saying I was talking because he and I share a name. The other reason I'm talking is because Diane, my wife, asked me to. Uncle Dan and Diane shared a special bond. I know he had a special bond with all of the outlaws, with Max and with Bob and Patty and Terry, but he had a particularly special one with Diane. After Dad died and Mom moved over to Dad's seat in the dining room next to Uncle Bill, Diane took Mom's old seat and planted herself next to Dan. I never had a designated seat of my own. I have no idea how she pulled it off. But it is what it was. It was what it was. It was her seat. I also have no idea how many little side conversations they had, how many secrets they shared, how many times they found themselves laughing at the rest of us as we teased and tortured and tormented one another. I just know that she has a deep love for him and a deeper sense of kinship with him. It might have to do something with their sense of being part of all this nonsense while slightly separated from it. It might have something to do with him sharing my name. It most likely has something to do with their shared love of wine. But I will not psychoanalyze it. I'll just share how much I appreciate it and love them both for it. I also wanted to ask her if she knew something we all didn't, because you see, Uncle Dan truly was, at his deepest and most profound level, an extremely talented editor. He was incredibly gifted at getting your story out of you, of asking you about yourself and your journey without ever making the conversation about him. We got the occasional story, like how when he was a baby and he got sick, his mother went over to Mrs. Capone's house, Al's mother, to get some sort of alcohol for him. Or the time he and his father and his brother Casey, who had taken the name Daniel in religious life, tried to cross the Canadian border with 3 driver's licenses, all bearing the same name. And the Royal Canadian Mounted Police thought that was a little odd. But that also contributed to our joking belief that he was Father Dan, Agent 00SJ, International Man of Mystery. We'd ask him if we'd see him next week, and he'd pull out that overstuffed, barely decipherable, most likely written in code, black pocket calendar from his giant dentist shirt pocket. Fumble through all the pages and loose sheets stuffed into it and mumble, maybe. He'd take a trip he claimed was to New Zealand, or to Rome, or wherever, and Saddam Hussein would get caught in a spider hole. Or Osama bin Laden would get Navy SEALed in Pakistan, and he'd be back the next week with a tan and a smile. But mostly he probed and he prodded and he solicited your story out of you. He asked all the right questions, and he remembered everything about everybody. You felt heard and understood and supported when you sat with him. He radiated warmth and pride and compassion. He took special delight in bringing Joe and Marie and Jeannie and Casey and Judy and Casey Jr. and all the other little twigs from his branch of the family tree into the fold, and as Patty put it, showing them off to us and showing us off to them. I read a note about his former superior general and friend, Pedro Arrupe, that said, through Father Arrupe, you sense the familiarity with God. I would like to believe that through Father Dan, through Uncle Dan, through Dan, you sensed the familiarity with God. You felt loved and you felt listened to. I will miss his crushing handshake, his booming laugh, his love for song, and how he sometimes fell sound asleep in that easy chair. And I will miss how he and his voice could fill a room. About 10 years ago, Diane's brother James died quite suddenly and unexpectedly, and her father Max asked me to speak at the wake service. The overwhelming majority of the people in the room were Catholic, and when I prayed, eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and may perpetual light shine upon him, may his soul and the souls of all the faithfully departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. There was a millisecond of uncomfortable silence, and then Dan's booming baritone filled the room and completed the prayer. May he rest in peace. We are all blessed to have known him and been loved by him. I am doubly blessed to share his name. May he rest in peace.